Here we go. So, the scent of Diana. Hey, here we go. This is what Diana smelled like. Actually, I feel a little bit emotional. Do I want to do this? Yeah, of course I'm going to do this. Right, here we go. This feels so wrong. Welcome to the broadcast, my fruits. It's an absolute tonic to see you, and I thank you for your company. I hope you're having a divine start to the week. I really do. The royal family have swung into action this week and been very busy, many members of the family, and we're going to take a look over those activities a little later in the broadcast, so do stick around. But we're going to kick off with a bit of fun. Yes, we are. We're going to have a bit of fun and a bit of mischief. I feel a bit mischievous doing this, and perhaps a little bit macabre, but what can I tell you, my dears? Curiosity got the better of me and overwhelmed me when Harry revealed in his tome that his mother's favourite fragrance was First by Van Cleef Arpels, and I've acquired a bottle of it. It's sitting right next to me. I haven't even opened the box yet because I didn't want to spoil my first sniff, which I'm going to share with you. I want to know what she smelt like. Is that terrible? I don't mean to sound macabre or mawkish or morbid, but I've always had, like many of you, I'm sure, a fascination with aromas, fragrances, perfume. I went through a real phase of getting into, the accords and the various notes and the names and trying to sniff things out. I was never actually very good, as many of the reviewers that you'll see online, picking out the various notes. I'm not really that great at it, but I'm going to have a bash at just seeing what my first impressions are of this fragrance, because it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So I'll be sharing that moment with you in just a moment. If you haven't read the tome, this is what Harry says. You see, he was trying to unlock his memories and deal with his grief. And he was speaking with his therapist, and it was his therapist who suggested to Harry, she urges him to explore his emotions using a bottle of perfume. And he approaches one of Diana's sisters, and it's one of Diana's sisters that tells Harry that it was First. It was this perfume called First, and I'm sure many of you would have worn First, or perhaps you still do. I believe it's discontinued from what I can tell, but I believe it was first released, and don't quote me, but I think it was 1976, so it's very much associated with the 70s, early 80s. I'm expecting it to be not really to my taste. I prefer modern perfume on ladies. I'm not so into the big dramatic florals of the past in the 70s or 80s, but I'm very open-minded about it, and I'm sure Diana had wonderful taste. So I'm kind of excited to share the first sniff with you. And Harry says in the book, at the start of the session, I lifted the lid, took a deep sniff. It was like a tab of LSD, he says. And here's hoping. I read somewhere that smell is our oldest sense, and that fitted with what I experienced in that moment, images rising from what felt like the most primal part of my brain. So I actually thought it was a rather touching moment in the tome, and there weren't many touching moments in there. Most of them made me want to run and hurl into a bucket. But this moment, if true, it was rather touching because scent is so very powerful. It can take you right back there, can't it? It can take you right back there. And so let's see where it takes me. And just to build suspense and keep you waiting for this dramatic moment, a little bit about Van Cleef Arpels, because they've been associated with the royals for quite some time, or should I say controversial royals, in the shape of the Duchess of Windsor, actually. Wallis Simpson in the past. She has an association with them. Van Cleef Arpels, excuse me if you already know this, I'm just speaking for those of you that might not know, is actually famous for its jewels, a French maison for jewellery, fine jewellery, exquisite jewellery, and the perfume was an offshot of that, in the vein of, for example, in my family, the ladies in my family were never into Chanel, for example. I know Chanel No. 5, of course, is a biggie. But that has no associations for me because nobody that I loved ever wore Chanel No. 5 to my memory. It was always actually Cartier for the ladies in my family. One specific fragrance, Panthère de Cartier. And it was such a reliable gift when it came to gift-giving seasons and birthdays and Christmases. If I couldn't think of anything else, if I wasn't inspired, I could always fall back, pop into Cartier, and they would wrap it, and making it look very fancy while I daydreamed looking at all the stunning array of jewellery around me. Just daydreaming, my dears. But, at least I could get the perfume. Well, after a few years, they changed the formulation and they changed the design of the bottle, and neither were as appealing as the original. So although I did buy my mother one bottle of the modern version, the updated version, it was never the same. But that was the maison, or one of the maisons I associate with my family, and it's very much in those primal memories of mine. Van Cleef and Arpels have a lighter aesthetic than many of those maisons. It is whimsical, it's delicate, it's always positive, it's always uplifting. So for example, the panther, the panthère, that is associated with Cartier is seductive. It is almost, could be read as with a slight threat, a little bit threatening, you know, that sort of sprinkling of civet. Whereas Van Cleef and Arpels, light. If they feature animals on any of their brooches and accessories, they're the kind that you want to pet, even if it's a lion. It's sort of rendered in a way that's adorable and sort of lovable. So it has a different feel, and one that would suit Diana, I would say. Never aggressive, that sort of feel. Now, the Duchess of Windsor, how she became to be associated with Van Cleef and Arpels was through an item of jewellery called the zip necklace. And it was actually, if rumours are to be believed, and this is mentioned on their own website as well, it was actually Wallis Simpson that came up with the idea of it, because she had been inspired by Elsa Schiaparelli, who in Paris was the end. She was the absolute end when it came to avant-garde fashion in Paris, and this was during the 1930s, when Bessie Wallis was inspired by the avant-garde fashion that Schiaparelli was producing, and much of it involved these zips, the idea of these utilitarian items like the zip being formed and reimagined and used in clothing and couture. And, well, Wallis decided that she would like to see this evolve and see the zip used in jewellery. She was acquainted with, and really rather quite good friends with, René Poisson, who was the artistic director at Van Cleef at the time. And she challenged him to create this zip necklace that transforms from a necklace to a bracelet by zipping it. Very ingenious, but would require a feat of engineering. Well, he took up the challenge, and after years, in fact, I think it was 1951 that it was revealed, don't quote me, but after 10 years in the making, he accomplished that feat, or rather, the Maison accomplished that feat, and the zip necklace came into being. A piece of high jewellery that functioned in the same way as the zip of her latest Schiaparelli purchase. 'Twas a triumph of engineering and design. Interlocking gold teeth studded with precious gems, an elegant necklace or as a bracelet when zipped. And her passion for jewellery and her husband's passion for jewellery was legendary. Edward, or David, whatever you want to call him, my dear, would pore over designs for hours together with the Maison to create these splendid pieces for Bessie Wallis. He would spend days designing and conjuring up all these fancy goods, with no expense spared. How wonderful, eh? One of the most famous pieces was from the Hawaiian collection by Van Cleef and Arpels. The brooch that was created for Bessie Wallis was the largest brooch in that collection. It was an absolute whopper, and it was done in the colours of that collection. The palette was red, blue, and gold. So there are associations, as you see, with this French brand, and at least two rather controversial royals. So after this dramatic build-up, let's hope it's not a complete anticlimax. Shall I crack open the box and have a sniff? Yes, I shall. And, well, we shall see if it has the same effect on me as Harry, who says it was like a tab of LSD. And he'd know. Well, here we are, my dears. Diana in a bottle. Diana in a bottle, this sort of amber nectar. First, I'm not sponsored, by the way. Well, I believe it's discontinued. And I'm talking, I sound as if I've got a blocked nose, because I don't know if you're able to do this. Some can and some can't. But I'm able to block off my nose so that I can't smell anything without pinching it, because I don't want to sniff it until I'm ready to sniff it. And actually, it's making me sound a little bit like Camilla, isn't it? That's a little bit, not desperately. I love him desperately. Yes. First, here we go, my dears, here we go. By the way, this is the eau de toilette. I don't know if Diana had the eau de toilette or the eau de parfum, but I'm going for the eau de toilette, which I think is more likely. And I've also heard that it's the nicest out of the two. Here we go. So, the scent of Diana. For the first spray, I'm going to spray it on this feather rather than my skin. And don't worry, the feather doesn't smell of anything. I've checked. So here we go. Let's give it 2. Okay, 3. Okay, here we go. This is what Diana smelled like. I'm actually going to sniff Princess Diana. Here we go. Oh! Actually, I feel a little bit emotional. Do I want to do this? And I feel a bit intrusive. Yeah, of course I'm going to do this. Right, here we go. This feels so wrong. Okay. Oh, it's lovely. Oh, it's lovely. That is absolutely lovely. It really is. It's very old school. It's very, very old school. It smells a little bit like department stores of my dim and distant youth, and I mean sort of toddler youth, ambling around Debenham stores, you know, places like that. But it's nicer than I expected it to be. It's dated, but it feels more like a classic rather than a sort of over-the-top relic. It's not dramatic like a sort of Shalimar affair. There's a freshness to it. And even though, as I say, I'm almost certain that none of my family members ever wore it. Maybe I should check with Mother. Maybe I should. But there is a sort of familiarity to it. There is a freshness to it. Somewhere in the gauze there is also a very tiny little tart element to it. Something a little sharp, which helps and stops it being too fluffy and powdery and soapy. And what I'm about to say, I know, is only because I've been influenced by what Harry has said about this. So my reaction is sort of biased and tainted in that way, if you will. But it does feel, you know, you can imagine a sort of 80s mother in a white blouse like this, cuddling her son. I mean, you can. It's a feeling of comfort, maternal warmth, but in a slightly upper crust kind of way. I have to say the top notes are probably, for my taste, the best. And then as it dries down, it becomes a little bit more mumsy, which isn't quite my bag. But I rather like that first hit, which is a little bit more sparkling. Not as Adahildic and effervescent as a Chanel No. 5, for example, but just a sort of gentle fizz. Is it something that I would advise you to run out and buy or purchase for a loved one? No, it is not. No, it is not. It's too old-fashioned, too old-school feminine, I would say, for most people's tastes, including mine. But as a moment to feel the fantasy, to channel the spirit of that era, that time, and upper crust young Sloanes such as Diana Spencer, it's a sort of fun experiment, if you will, a sort of time capsule. But I think you have to have the right sort of charm and personality to carry off something like this. I think it has that rather curious mix, especially as it's drying down, where one can't really decide if it's absolutely disgusting or if it's really rather splendid, or some sort of mix between the two. Because I think on the wrong person with the wrong body chemistry, it would repel me, to be quite honest with you. But on the right day, in the right season, the right circumstance, on the right skin, getting a little gust of it on the breeze, would be rather appealing, I can imagine, and with a little sprinkling of magic. As it dries down more, it's too soapy for my taste. Too soapy. And I'm actually getting a little bit of talc. I'm going to try a squirt on my wrist. 3 squirts. Actually, I like that on the wrist. Brings out some of its warmth, obviously, and its sensuality. A little bit of sex, perhaps. Online it says this timeless fragrance opens with sparkling aldehydes and fruity notes, which develops into sensual floral scent. The base is woody yet sweet, with amber giving the fragrance warmth and an exceptional staying power. Yes, it's almost as if the colours you saw, the white feather and the sort of golden juice of the perfume do combine. They are the colours that come to one's mind. I didn't really get much green, but sort of white and with some yellow coming through, just a touch of amber warmth. Apparently the top notes are aldehydes, bergamot, blackcurrant, peach, mandarin, orange and raspberry. Middle notes are narcissus, hyacinth, jasmine, lily of the valley, carnation, ylang-ylang, orris root, tuberose, Turkish rose and orchid. Base notes are civet, oak moss, honey, amber, sandalwood, musk, vetiver, tonka bean and vanilla. Well, there are plenty of reviews and more in-depth descriptions and creative descriptions of this online that you can find if you're curious. Quite a few of them actually mention that it was something they associate with their mothers wearing at Christmas, and I can imagine that as well as being a sort of fragrance for all seasons, really. It is classy, it is tasteful, smells a little bit expensive, it's definitely got an air of refinement, and I think because it's not too overpowering, it's quite versatile as well, so quite good for the office, a sort of sexy secretary affair, office, and then a couple of extra squirts as you go off into the evening. I can imagine it being quite intoxicating and seductive with the right dress, an off-the-shoulder number, or something showing off the décolletage. And the bottle itself, the design of the bottle and the colour of the liquid, I think gives it a touch of opulence that wouldn't be there without it. Quite nice. I think the danger is that sometimes when you get a whiff of it, it can remind you of grannies. And grannies are a wonderful thing, my dear, but not everybody wants to smell like an old granny. Or should I say, grannies of a certain vintage from a certain era, or great-grandmothers even. But I've got to say that even that first sniff that I had, there's something boozy in there too with that first sniff. When it first comes out, when it's first spritzed, that's the best hit. That's the best moment. And as I say, it even feels familiar to me, and I've got no association with it whatsoever, as far as I'm aware. Perhaps a headmistress or something might have squirted it or something, and I never knew what they were wearing, which is taking me back to various memories, but it immediately felt like a sort of familiar embrace, and even though it's fresh, it was a warm embrace. So I can only imagine how Harry would have felt conjuring up those memories and evoking those old feelings and delighting the senses and luxuriating with them, as he says, like a sort of tab of LSD. I can absolutely understand it. And yes, how very interesting to know that this was what lovely Diana wore. Although I'm sure King Charles might not have such fond memories of it, dare I say. It'd probably take one to, oh no, not her. Well, that sated my curiosity, and I was glad to find that I don't hate it. I really rather like it. But as with any fragrance, I have to sit with it, I have to test it out in certain occasions, events, and see how it goes. Can't make up one's mind too quickly when it comes to this sort of thing. But I'm going to test it out. I've got a feeling that it's going to put a spring in my step for a cocktail party or something. I'm going to wait for the right affair, spritz it behind a few pulses and see if it gets the pulses racing and see what it attracts. That's what it's all about, isn't it, my dear? And as well as channeling the royal spirit, I can channel Diana with thirst. And Diana's perfume is not the only relic that's been in the news recently. Did you see that Kim Kardashian acquired a piece of jewellery that Diana wore? Now, Diana didn't own this piece of jewellery. Jewellery that she owned rarely goes to auction. I mean, rarely, because all the good stuff went to William and Harry, most of it, and family members. But this one item, this unusual item for Diana, was loaned to her, and she was seen wearing it in 1987. It's said that it was loaned to her on a few occasions, but to my knowledge, the only time it was captured was when she wore it to a function, a charity event or a gala in 1987. It's called the Atala Cross, so named, I believe, after its late owner, who was the businessman Naim Atala, who knew Diana. But this businessman had his finger in a few pies, this Naim Atala, and one of those pies was jewellery, because he was actually the MD of Asprey for a time, as well as being a publisher, and it's his son, Ramsay, that auctioned it recently as part of his late father's estate. And apparently the bidding wars got very exciting towards the end, because it eventually sold for about double or over double its original estimates, and everybody has said that it would not have reached anywhere near the number that it did reach, which was £163,800, I believe. I think it was pounds, by Kim Kardashian. There was a bit of a scrap between the last four bidders in the final moments, but a representative of Miss Kardashian or Mrs. Kardashian or Kanye West or whoever she's dating at the moment. I don't know, my dear, so let's just call her Kim. I don't follow the Kardashians, I'm afraid. Well, she got her way, and it is a lovely piece, isn't it, if you're into crosses? It's an elaborate silver piece with square-cut amethysts and accented with circular-cut diamonds from the 1920s. Auctioned by Sotheby's, and the total diamond weight is of 5.25 carats. Well, I'm sure we're going to be treated with Kim Kardashian wearing this piece, and she'll get loads of headlines and publicity for it, as she did for slipping into, or squeezing into, or forcing herself into Marilyn Monroe's gown, which I didn't like, I've got to tell you, and I won't especially like her donning this pendant. However, it wasn't Diana's. She hasn't purchased a piece of Diana's jewellery collection. It was someone else's that she happened to fling over her neck for an event or two. So, no, Kim, you know. Yeah, I've got nothing especially against the gal. Actually, when I watch her on the few videos I've seen of her, she comes over very well, very nice. So I've got nothing against her. But, you know, you're an icon in your own right, my dear. You don't have to acquire these objets in order to bolster that iconic image of yours. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit too unnecessarily shady and salty about it, because it's a beautiful item. She can afford it. If she wants to parade around in it, good for her. And wouldn't it be delicious if we all find out that actually one of the bidders that was pitted against her was Nutmeg, and she was outfoxed at the last moment by Kim Kardashian. But enough about the late Princess of Wales, because we have a living Princess of Wales in the form of our fair Catherine, and she hosted a reception for the World Cup winning England wheelchair rugby league team. She was understated but gorgeous in Roland Mouret, this burgundy suit, ready to wear, and like a fine burgundy wine, ready to guzzle. And we've seen this outfit before, by the way. Do you remember in Boston just a few months ago, where she paired it with a pink top, some pink number? Well, this time we have a delicate white knit in Edelweiss. She revealed to everybody gathered there that Prince Louis is mad about rugby, and her handsome husband, Wiliam, was doing wonderful work at one of his homeless interests. As you know, homelessness is one of his great passions, and he's on a mission to eradicate it from the island. And he visited a hub for DePaul UK, which is a youth homelessness charity helping young people who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. He visited their London hub to highlight the work they are doing to help young people who are experiencing homelessness or insecure housing. And as you know, he's patron of a couple of homeless charities that he has a great involvement with and has for many years, The Passage and Centrepoint. And he was introduced to a lot of that work via Diana, wasn't he? And I'm sure Charles behind the scenes as well, but Diana gets the spotlight there. And as we saw last year, he did a stint as a big issue vendor on the streets of London, didn't he? He is known for highlighting the work of these charities wherever he possibly can. And just like Catherine and Wiliam, you'll see during the rest of this broadcast various members of the royal family who have been out and about this week doing sterling work. Remember, these are the royals that Harry decided to shade, although he didn't specify any of them by name, but he mentioned how so many members of the royal family treat these engagements as if it's some sort of checkbox affair that they don't really care about, but they just want to get their number of engagements up for the court circular. That was so utterly immature and untrue of him to do that, because do you realise how many hundreds of patronages they all have between them, this very small number of working royals, especially now that the monarchy is becoming more slimmed down. There's no Duke of York anymore. He lost all his patronages. And of course, all of the ones that Harry and Meghan took on, of which there were many. And also, they were the kind of patronages that one has to get very much involved with. So everybody from Catherine to William to the Wessexes have all taken on an extra burden because of Harry and Meghan. And they are the ones that are putting out the criticism and criticising members of the royal family for apparently having this sort of dilettante approach to engagements and just checking them off the list so that they can bump up the numbers to impress the public. I don't think so, my dear. You know, with all these engagements, there are various projects and patronages where they will have more of the royal family's ear and more of their time and more of their involvement. I have no doubt that there are a few, given that some of the members of the royal family attend over 300 engagements during the year, 400 engagements during a year. There are some that they are going to just pay a bit of lip service to, some that they are just going to make a fleeting visit to inspect and have a look what's going on. Do you realise the power that a royal visit pulls? It's publicity you can't buy. It's an association that can't be measured. And many of these organisations and charities and lunches understand this. And that's all that they need from the royal involvement and the royal seal of approval. This is stardust that is hankered after by every charity and organisation within the United Kingdom and beyond. So sometimes it is just that sprinkling of stardust. I'm sorry, but how dare Harry have the nerve to make such a sweeping generalisation and to denigrate all that work that the royal family did. And let's not forget, you know, let's take Princess Anne, for example. She's in her 70s. She's done this since the word go, you know, all of her working life, every day, all these, every year. It's not like a politician that comes and goes, does his bits until he gets voted, till she does her term and then leaves or resigns. No, my dear, they don't do that. It's a job for life. So not that they need to be cut any slack, because they're not slack, but, you know, spiritually speaking, cut them some slack. You know, I'm talking about the likes of Sophie Wessex, who we see out all the time as a wonderful ambassador. And let's wish her a happy birthday. I think it's today. 58 years old she be. 58 years old. And, you know, I often speak about the seasons of life, and it tickles many of you when I say, you know, she's in the springtime, he's in the winter of life, there's a touch of autumn. I know that it tickles a lot of my basketeers. And generally speaking, I split the seasons up, and every season is glorious, as we can see from everybody from Charlotte to the late Queen. Every season is glorious, but I will generally split them up into 25-year seasons. So 0 to 25 is spring, 25 to 50 is summer, 50 to 75 is autumn, and 75 onwards is winter. And they're all glorious seasons. But then within those seasons, just because I like to be a bit creative and my imagination touches on things, you see, Sophie's 58, so that takes her into the early, about to approach the mid-autumn season. And autumn's a gorgeous season for a woman, it truly is. But for Sophie, I always think of her because she's emerged from summer, and it's almost as if she's enjoying this Indian summer that's dwelling and lingering a little bit more and basking in the sunshine. Can you see how her face always has that slightly sunburnished glow, doesn't it, of gold? She brings this gold element into any proceeding. You can't help being illuminated by it yourself, can you? Do you see? It's this Indian summer into fall, and that's exactly what I see in her, my dear. And so we wish her a very happy birthday today, and she was wished a happy birthday by the Connaught School. And she thanked them. They were thanked online. Thank you, Connaught School, for the lovely cake during Her Royal Highness's visit yesterday. And she was presented with the nosegay, a beautiful nosegay in canary yellow, lemon sherbet and green. And that brought out that Indian summer glow to her, didn't it? This was the Connaught Junior School in Bagshot, Surrey. And Sophie was there to open a laboratory in a wool blend dress by Gabriella Hurst, which is much loved by members of the royal family, isn't it, including Catherine. A black and blue striped horizontal affair with black and white pearl earrings, a longer silver necklace that featured a statement pearl, and a cream floor-length coat, very chic. And it was lovely to see her in a personalised apron she wore, or pinny. You know, when I read that she was wearing an apron, I thought, well, that's a pinny. And that's because it says, you know, that she joined science, IT, home economics lessons at this school. She joined in with all those lessons. It reminded me of home economics. Because we did home economics at school, and it tickles me that they still call it that, which was basically cookery. It was a bit of cookery. But in home economic class, I can remember 2 teachers that ran that department. One was my favourite, and we called her Mrs. Pud because she looked like a pudding. She would teach us how to make, bake the puddings, create them, but she looked like a pudding. She was gorgeous, sort of this plump affair with sort of a face with grey hair, but looked like it had been sort of drawn up at the chin like a velvet purse, you know, sort of drawn up here into these little pursed lips, and no makeup anywhere else, but she had bright, I think it was a sort of pinky red cherry, like a glaced cherry in the middle, in the drawstring, and little currant bun eyes, doughy face. She was wonderful, was Mrs. Pud. And then the other one was Mrs. Worth. And the reason she makes me giggle is because actually people were a little bit frightened of her. She had a reputation for being strict, but she wasn't actually that strict. She just had a sort of wry, knowing look on her face. And you know how everybody at school, well, at our school anyway, there were rumours about every teacher, you know, you'll get various rumours. The rumours about her was that she was a lush, you know, that she was a drunk, she was an alcoholic, and every time she went to the staff room, if you looked through the window, you could see her glugging or brandy or rum or whatever she pulled out. There was that rumour. The other rumour, it's all coming back to me, is that she had a penchant for the young boys. I guess she was in her 50s. To be honest, she was probably late 30s, 40s, but when we were the age we were, very, very young, you know, she looked sort of 50 or 60 to us. But she had short, quite closely cropped blonde hair. She would wear red lipstick as well. And everybody said that she had a penchant for the boys, and she would kind of corner them, and well, there were all kinds of stories and tales that I'm not going to tell, but you know, when she came back from her boozy lunch hour, she would be a little bit flirtatious with some of the lads, should we put it that way. But the funny thing is, her name was Mrs. Worth, or Miss Worth. She was she married? I think it was Miss Worth, but somebody discovered that her full name was Wigglesworth, and that all those years she'd been disguising it as Worth, but she was actually Wigglesworth. And of course, when everybody found out through various official documents, they made her life rather miserable, I think. Although I think it's a fine name, Wigglesworth. It's, I don't know, rather Dickensian, isn't it? But the fact that she'd hidden it and then it was discovered wasn't such a good mood. Anyway, this long story is to tell you that it was Mrs. Pud that used to call aprons pinnies, and I think it is a popular name for aprons here in the kingdom. I don't think abroad, you know, an abbreviation of pinafore. But so even though they're aprons, I will always think of them as pinnies, whether it's wrong or right. And also, she pronounced, you know, in the kingdom we have scones, scones, and scone is correct. I mean, it depends regionally where you're from. When I say correct, I say that is the received wisdom, that it's scone, you know, a cheese scone. Well, I am on the other side, I'm afraid, because that was how she taught me, and they will always be jam scones to me, even though it is vulgar and it's not right, really, and, you know, slap on the wrist. And so I do correct myself, and I will say scone when I have to. You know, the Queen would say scone, but in my heart it's a jam scone or a cheese scone and a pinny. But these are the quirks of language, aren't they, my dear? everybody talks about rights and wrongs, including me, but I think it's wonderful and delicious when you form your own ways of using language and your own relationship to them and words. So in that respect, of course, there's no right or wrong. You know, someone picked me up recently because when I spoke about the Queen, and when I've spoken about her in the past, you know, as Elizabeth Regina, a few people actually have picked me up on this, trying to correct me. Actually, I'll read you this little interchange that I had with Ms. Ants 11, which was a friendly interchange, totally friendly, and we just had a nice conversation about it. But this viewer had said, "I love you, River, but it really irks me to hear the word Regina mispronounced as Regina. Sounds an awful lot like the lady part. Regina is the Latin and Italian word for queen and is therefore pronounced Regina." Well, I shall read you my reply, which was that the lady part that she mentioned also comes from Latin, meaning sheath or scabbard, I believe. So using your logic, why don't you pronounce that word vagina? Good point, right? I pronounce it the same way that the late Queen pronounced Regina. Your version of Regina is closer to the ecclesiastical pronunciation used by the Catholic Church. So I thought I'd mention that for anybody else that's wondering. The received wisdom in England is that it is pronounced Regina, despite any connotations or what it might rhyme with. I mean, it's a bit juvenile to worry about what it might rhyme with, although I understand it's a little bit comical, but that is how the Queen pronounced it. I've heard it. That's how it was pronounced during the coronation in 1953 or whatever. And all the expert commentators and curators and historians that I've ever seen and watched in documentaries and online have all said Regina. And as you suggest, my dear, it is Regina in many other parts of the world, and there's probably a couple of people here who might say it that way. But as I told you, that was more related to the Catholic Church, the ecclesiastical pronunciation, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. It just became the fashion for the Latin to be pronounced that way over the past couple of centuries in England. So I'm not saying that it is the correct interpretation of the Latin. I'm just saying that that is the way that it has evolved on this side of the pond. And it may just be a quirk of these shores, and if so, so be it. And perhaps it will evolve and change over time. Let's face it, it's not going to be in much usage for rather a long time, because we've got 3 kings on the way, if the order of succession goes to plan. 3 kings on the way, if they make it, if there is still a monarchy by the time William comes around or George comes around, you know, we shall see. The Countess of Wessex also visited a newly refurbished hospital, the Heatherwood Hospital in Ascot, and she carried more blooms in white and green. And we move from the Pearl of Wessex to the Earl of Wessex in the form of our dear Edward, who is the patron of the Production Guild of Great Britain. You see, next week he's going to be bestowing the first film and TV industry award created in his name on its inaugural winner. At the moment, there are 4 industry organisations shortlisted, and he visited one of them, which was Mama Youth Project, which is a media charity, a national charity, which recruits, trains and nurtures young people from underrepresented groups. The Thriller Queen, our thriller Camilla, visited a science hub, a new science hub at the University of Aberdeen, meeting staff and students. And she said, coming to this university and this city has always felt a bit like coming home. Firstly, because my father's family came from Scotland. Secondly, because my husband and I are lucky enough to spend precious time each year in Aberdeenshire. And finally, because 10 years ago, I received the great honour of being installed as Chancellor of this very special university. The colourways were divine, weren't they? Those colourways on the outfit. Delicious. Tartan cuffs and lining, creamy frills, luminescent pearls on the ear. Absolutely gorgeous. And the rear, there's always a wonderful gauzy softness to the rear, almost like Farrah Fawcett flicks going on. And, you know, we talk about the seasons of life, and she's sort of kicked off the winter season now and illustrates how beautiful it can be. And it's very much, at the moment, the winter scene of a cosy winter cottage with warm colours and those Scottish tartans. You know, that sort of thing. You know, one thinks of the winter season as majestic and snowy and icy. But just as with all the other seasons, there are different months with different qualities and different elements. Poppy Scotland were honoured to welcome Her Royal Highness Anne, the Princess Royal, and they welcomed her to Lady Haig's Poppy Factory to officially reopen the campus following its refurbishment. And Poppy Scotland provides life-changing support for the armed forces in Scotland. And Anne was shown the poppy making process and exhibition space, and she was utterly elegant in a muted sort of yellowy, goldy, tan, almost green number with a chic scarf and a brooch. 33 disabled veterans work in this factory, making more than 3 million poppies each year for the Scottish Poppy Appeal. Well, I don't know about you, my dears, but I'm going to channel my inner Sloane Ranger and do a Diana on the prowl. Yes, I'm going to do a Diana, and I'm going to take to the high street in my demure white blouson and my Van Cleef Arpels. First time. It's my first time. So pure and virginal. Going to take to the streets, trot about with this wonderful sillage cape and see what it attracts, my dear. But you know, got to channel that spirit, that Spencer spirit, that flirtatious, mischievous, lively spirit of Diana. Thank you for your company. It's very much appreciated. Thank you also to those of you that have sent me a tip to treat myself to a little ice bun or a cup of coffee. It is very much appreciated, and you're very kind. Thank you sincerely. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Stay royal, stay fruity, and on royal duty, my dears. Ta-ra and toodle pip.